and welcome to the episode 17 of the UNews Weekly, the audio-video podcast coming to you from the UN Information Office in Tashkent.
News hot from the pot. Get ready to find out the brightest weekly events of the United Nations in the country.
I'm Akbar Khakimov.
And Nikina Haitova.
Welcome to the show. Coming to you in this program,
the presentation of a publication entitled Applied Art of Uzbekistan, Traditions and Innovations was organized by the UNESCO office in Tashkent on the 21st of May 2013.
On the first stage, we covered the questions regarding main art forms like embroidery, pottery and carving.
Teams of students from the Gubkin Russian State University of Oil and Gas Tashkent Branch presented their works within the contest, which was held on the 22nd of May in recognition of the International Day of Biodiversity.
We're here at the event, and to be exact, at the competition of presentation devoted to International Biodiversity Day.
One more Model United Nations was held this week, this time at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy, on the topic Peace and Security in the New Millennium, creating the world free of nuclear weapons.
This MUN conference is 7th annual in our university, actually.
As well as a special guest section when we're joined by Ben Slay, a senior economist from the United Nations Development Programme Regional Bureau for Europe and CIS, and we talk about the post-2015 agenda.
We have to decide what progress means, and we have to understand what the drivers are that determine global progress.
Our first story is about a presentation of a field research carried out by an Uzbek academician. Akbar Khakimov has presented his new publication, Applied Art of Uzbekistan, Traditions and Innovations, supported by the UNESCO's Tashkent office. And the book demonstrates the experience and good practices of leading craftsmen of Uzbekistan who preserve traditional arts and adapt traditions to the present-day environment. We spoke to the academician himself.
Инициатива представительства ЮНЕСКО и мои интересы, они совпали, и мы решили осуществить этот проект.
I'm very pleased that the UNESCO initiative coincided with my thoughts and we decided to launch this project. On the first stage, we covered the questions regarding main art forms like embroidery, pottery and carving. These actually are the three main directions included in this publication. We have also collected items on other art types like jewelry, wood carving, papier-mâché and weaving. Our publication mainly includes information about three directions for national art. In the long run, we will probably be able to portray all the other forms of our art and works of masters in this area. It's very important that quality polygraph was used to make this book. It was printed in Istanbul. I'm very thankful to UNESCO office in Uzbekistan and Mrs. Krista Pikat for creating all opportunities in order to give this edition a nice look, because the applied arts should be shown in equality.
This publication is not only to serve as a practical manual for craftsmen, culture specialists and students, but also it is hoped to be of general public interest, thus contributing to the safeguarding, developing and promotion of handicrafts in the country.
How do the actions of the oil and gas companies in reducing impacts on biodiversity differ from one another? What do they have in common? Which of these experiences are applicable in Uzbekistan? Teams of students from the Gubkin Russian State University of Oil and Gas Tashkent Branch presented their views on these issues at the presentation, which was held on the 22nd of May in the recognition of the International Day of Biodiversity.
Dear friends, today is the 22nd of May and we're here at the event, and to be exact, at the competition of presentation devoted to International Biodiversity Day. And if it's well known, the influence of oil and gas companies' activities on biodiversity has become an urgent problem.
And the government of many countries in the world direct their close attention on oil and gas companies' activity on minimization their damage and restoration damage areas, and of course on conservation of flora and fauna in commercial regions.
Today we try to present biodiversity preservation experience of the leading oil and gas companies such as British Petroleum, Chevron and Shell, and also to analyze what of these activities we can do in Uzbekistan.
The analysis of current companies' environmental preservation actions and the set of offers on application their experience in Uzbekistan and vice versa become an important result of this work.
The students have had an opportunity not only to present their vision for the conservation of biodiversity, but have also enhanced their knowledge in the field of new technologies for the conservation of biodiversity in the oil and gas industry. The specialists have shared their knowledge with the students, thus contributing to the further dissemination of best biodiversity practices among future employees of the oil and gas industry. You're watching UNews Weekly, and the new season of the Model United Nations conferences is in full swing, and the next one, the latest one, took place in the University of World Economy and Diplomacy, closely backed up by the UN Information Office. And this time, the student delegates focused on the subject of peace and security in the new millennium, creating the world free of nuclear weapons.
Good afternoon, my name is and I'm chairing the Model United Nations Conference at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy, and today we are simulating the first committee, which is Disarmament and International Security of General Assembly. And well, I have to note that this MUN conference is 7th annual in our university. Actually, the UN started a good tradition of introducing this conference to Uzbekistan, and with its initiative to enlarge the scope of the conference by inviting students of different universities. And for right now, I can say with confidence that we have established a very successful league of MUN, and there are people who are in charge of organization, there are people who are on board of the committee and basically run the conference as a staff and as officials. So for me, it's a great honor to be chairing such a talented group of students. And today we have been discussing the topic of creating the new world free of nuclear weapons. And we have heard very interesting positions of different countries. And of course, we faced some contradictions. And right now, my delegates are in their informal caucusing. And I have noticed that we are expecting 2 resolutions from 2 different blocks of countries, and it will be very interesting to observe. And the students of Uzbekistan, they love the MUN conference, and while it is a game for us, it still remains so realistic, and considering the fact especially that the opinion of each country is considered in the General Assembly, all of them try to be active, to prepare actively the official position of the country they represent. And today I very much enjoyed moderating their caucuses. I enjoyed watching how they had negotiations and formed coalitions during the unmoderated caucuses, how they presented the position of their country, and they all were up to the point. And I can say that we did a really good job. And as far as our successes, the students of our university, the University of World Economy and Diplomacy, have achieved a lot within the framework of Model United Nations. We have participated in many international conferences such as Rome International Model United Nations, the Model United Nations of Spain, Silkway International Model United Nations, which is annually held in the Kimev University of Kazakhstan, and also some of us have taken part in Global Model United Nations. And as a chair and as a member of organization committee, I'm very, very proud of students who study here, and of course I'm hoping that our success won't stop at this point.
2015 marks the end of a timeline agreed by all the nations of the country for the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals, unanimously agreed during the UN General Assembly in 2000. Beyond 2015, now the world will be focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals, and these are the subject for today's interview.
Stay tuned, it's a special guest section.
You're tuned to UNews Weekly, the episode 17 coming to you from the UN Information Office in Tashkent. And today for this special guest section, we're joined by Mr. Ben Slay, who's the senior economist at the UNDP's Regional Bureau for Europe and CIS. Welcome to our office, Ben. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
As the world is now looking beyond 2015, to identify the goals and assignments for the countries to the purposes to achieve after 2015, because that's when we crossed the finish line set for the Millennium Development Goals. Can you give us a big picture of the most important areas for the Central Asia?
Well, in this respect, I think Central Asia is like every other part of the world. While the successor to the Millennium Development Goals are important, at the end of the day, these goals are just ways of measuring progress. We have to decide what progress means, and we have to understand what the drivers are that determine global progress, whether people are lifted out of poverty, whether the environment and planetary boundaries can be respected, whether our grandchildren can live in a world that's as good or better as the world we live in now. And here I think that just as is the case with every other region in the world, Central Asia is affected by deep tectonic shifts in the global political economy of development. When the Millennium Summit happened in the year 2000, the United States and Western Europe pretty much dominated the global scene. This is no longer the case now. China, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, India, these countries together have more GDP than the United States does, and almost as much as the United States and Europe together. And if they continue to grow the way they have been, 15 years from now, they'll be bigger. And yet the world's global governance architecture does not reflect the changing balance, the changing relationships. And this is clearly something that needs to happen. We know that there's not any one-size-fits-all development models that work for everyone. We have to be pragmatic and at the same time identify things that are working in some countries and could perhaps be replicated in others. And these sorts of tasks are just as relevant for Central Asia and Uzbekistan as anyone else. So we're entering into a brave new world where no one has all the answers, where no one dominates. We have to remember we're all in this together and act accordingly. And in such an environment, the United Nations, as a multilateral forum for all countries, is extremely important in finding the answers to the questions that confront us all.
Thank you. As the world is changing now, as the priorities are changing, because we will step into a new area of sustainable development goals. Where does that leave the business practices in the region, and not only in the region, the entire world? Because the new era definitely creates new challenges for promoting and advancing in the business area, business practice in the region.
Well, in that sense, the businesses in Central Asia face similar challenges to businesses everywhere. Increasingly, global competitiveness means not business as usual. It means taking long-term views, not only on what is happening in markets, but what is happening in terms of sustainability, what consumers are thinking of, what the resource base will be in the future. So, for example, there are many important Central Asian companies that are based on oil and gas, or based on the extraction and processing of metals. Well, that can only work as long as the oil and gas and the raw materials are in the ground. But what happens when they start to disappear? What happens when they start to be used up? What other sources of competitive advantage, of wealth, can be found? And ultimately, of course, it's always good to have more gas than less, but the true wealth of nations is in their people. It's in the quality of the human capital, the education of women as well as men, and the ability of governments to create environments for businesses and for people, for families, for households, to realize their full potential. And increasingly, it's about sustainable production. It's about sustainable consumption. It's thinking about how what a business does today affects its future competitiveness and commercial prospects. And the countries themselves have to think this way as well. So a country that, or a company that just thinks in the short term, that thinks of making a quick buck and then getting out before the consequences come, in the long run, that's just simply not going to work. We need long-run, sustainable business strategies, business practices that reflect a consideration of the political and the social together with the environmental, as well as the purely commercial.
Yes, and my last question, Ben, to you is, the entire world has witnessed a huge economic downturn crisis recently, and how has that impacted? What impact has it had on the development funding? As I know that the United Nations Development Program is the biggest, most development organization, and it has definitely been impacted by the crisis as well, hasn't it?
Development finance, as is the case with many other aspects of development, is changing dramatically. When the United States and Western Europe dominated development, they dominated development finance. Funds that were considered to be official development assistance, ODA, that were granted according to certain criteria, pretty much comprised the lion's share of the money that's available. This isn't the case anymore. Many, including Central Asian and developing countries, are developing now not because of money that comes from the United States or the European Union, but because of resources that come from China. And certainly true in Africa. Chinese companies are building bridges, dams, factories, schools, many other industrial and commercial and social activities come with that. But that this is a new model that doesn't have necessarily human rights or good governance standards attached to it. So even within the realm of money that comes from governments, the picture is changing. However, it's not really even anymore about money that comes from governments. If you look at the countries of Central Asia, none of them really relies on development finance that comes from abroad. Even countries like Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, which are relatively reliant on development funding, these funds are much, much less than the money that comes in every year in remittances from labor migrants working in Russia, Kazakhstan, and other places. And this money goes right to poor families for whom migration is the best coping strategy. And in many ways, it's a much better, more direct, pro-poor way of financing reductions in poverty. Now, of course, not everything about labor migration and remittances are perfect, but if we really want to have this finance be a genuine form of development finance, we have to integrate remittance flows into microfinance funding operations in rural areas so that these monies don't just stay with certain households, but then can be lent out to other households and promote community development. This is the sort of challenge that now comes with development finance in the new era. Now, clearly, UNDP needs to adapt, as all development actors need to adapt to the new financial circumstances. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, our funds that come from the traditional donors have fallen significantly over the past few years, and that places a greater challenge and a greater burden on UNDP to find other sources of funds. And what UNDP and other UN agencies are increasingly doing is offering a value proposition to the governments in which they work and saying, look, you're building a dam, you're building a school, you're procuring equipment, we can help you do that. And if you put some of the money through us, we can do a good job in helping you to meet your needs, and this helps us keep our business model approach as well. This approach was made viable in Latin America about 20 years ago, and it's increasingly spreading. So in such circumstances, the UN and UNDP can no longer rely on business as usual approaches, but have to be increasingly entrepreneurial, think about the long term, about sustainability, in order to remain a viable development partner for governments in Central Asia, and in this case, also the government of Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Ben, for your answers. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been joined by Ben Slay, the senior economist at the UNDP Regional Bureau for Europe and CIS. Thank you again for your time. Hope to see you again in the future.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
With this, we bring the 17th episode of the UNews Weekly to an end, and we, of course, very much look forward to your feedback.
If you want to find out more, please go to www.un.uz
and on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Unique Tashkent. For now, it is goodbye.
Goodbye.